Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another session of Focus on Liberia on the marketplace where we talk everything finance and economics. Uh, we apologize for being late today. We had some technical difficulties, so we had to, get that straightened out. Uh, Again, thank you for joining us wherever you are. Share if you have a minute, just share the show with your audience and your friends, and invite people in. It's going to be very short today because we started late, so we're trying to do it within an hour. Uh, and today our topic is actually we're going to be discussing the recent pension bill that was rejected in, I think, in the Senate. So we're going to go in detail what it means, whether it was good or bad, how they can fix it and make it better if they need to. And again, always I have my usual co-host here, Larry, Depu. Guys, we're mixing Alex today. Alex is having what is he having again? I
It's
think
anniversary, right?
anniversary. So Alex, enjoy. You know, happy anniversary to you and your wife. Hopefully you can join us next Saturday. But
Hmm.
on that note, we said thank you for joining us again. I have my usual co-hosts here, Larry uh, and Depu. Guys, welcome.
Thanks, Gabriel.
Yeah,
Thanks, Gabriel.
yeah. So I think it was sometime midweek. Larry posted this topic that there was a Senate bill, pension bill that was rejected in uh, the Senate, and I didn't, there's certain things in Liberia that I follow, certain political aspect that I follow, so I started digging up on it, wanted to know why they rejected it, and um, you know, how do we even have a pension when we have a struggling, country? But that's besides the point. So what we want to do today, we want to take our time and look at the pension, that bill specifically, why it was rejected, as I said earlier, and how, if we can make it better. One of the biggest questions that I have, and I think we'll get into that later, was who's covered under the pension? Like, is it just the lawmaker, or is it every? Maybe you guys can help me answer that question. Or is it every government employee that's covered under that? There's a lot of question. What are the age limit? How do they even calculate what percentage you get? What is the retirement age? All of those things. Besides it being rejected, those are like the nitty gritty stuff. But maybe you guys can help me get into it. Are you guys familiar with this pension bill at all, and how is it funded?
Go ahead, Depu.
Thank you, Gabriel. Frankly speaking, I was trying to lay hand on the copy of the draft bill, and but realistically, it's actually for the national legislature and the executive, specifically the president, vice president. These are the people that are covered under the bill. And interestingly, I can see that it was poorly calculated by the Senate committee, whoever committee that prepared this.
Hmm.
I was wondering whether, first of all, they have been working along with NASCOR to see what have been the arrangement on a NASCOR contribution that they are making for their retirement. If not, what could also be some of the compensation arrangement that they can have? Because remember that just this budget, 2022 budget, those people have increased their appropriation by 18 million. They have now 48 million
Hmm.
dollars. So why didn't we make the arrangement to see how best they can make contribution to their own pension scheme
Yeah,
under the NASCOM arrangement, so that people would know that indeed this is national policy instead of it being like just selective, you
right.
know, policy from government. And besides that, one of the things, the reason why I said was poorly planned too is that look, you need to look at the wage bill have been one of the sticky issue for the government since 2018.
Hmm.
The wage bill was picked up from 19 million to 310.
Mhm.
And that's one of the main reasons why the IMF and all partners said, no, you gotta bring it down to help stabilize the economy. With all of these challenges, you can't come up with another arrangement which is not planned, it's not programmed for the legislature, and you started enforcing it and started passing it into law. So I believe they need more consultation. They need the legislative budget committee needed to have sat down with them to plan how much will it cost if you are to do this, how many person would be, what contribution can they make, and how much can government match it, all of these things for the benefit. But instead, they came up with a lump sum figure and say 50% of the salary.
Yep.
That is somewhat like, even if you have a company and you are CEO for the company, I never heard that the CEO of a company will say my wage after now 50% of my wage will be given for retirement. I never heard that.
Mhm.
You can have contribution which should match with the employer contribution, instead of you just giving that kind of a blanket security to yourself. And the discouraging thing about it too is that it's not only to them, it's also extend over to family members,
Mhm.
depending that if a president is dead, the wife carry 25% of that.
Yep. Yep.
And if the wife is dead, then the children also carry. So it's almost like you building a
A
sovereign
lifetime.
wealth fund. I
Right.
would call it sovereign wealth fund for family. That is something that they need to review. I'm glad that the House of Representatives rejected it.
Yeah.
And I still doubt whether the House of Representatives would not have another way of negotiating this thing with the Senate.
Mhm.
Uh, Personally, I always feel that these guys do this thing for political interest, for political
Yeah.
purpose,
Mhm.
because some of the signatories are opposition, so it's been seen it from that perspective. But mind you, they can be doing closed door negotiation and that thing will resurface in different form. So that's what I see. And Liberian people, we have to watch out closely and
Yeah.
see how best we can create opportunity in the private sector than to take the national resources and invest it into public sector to enrich individual. I thank you.
Yeah. Oof. Larry,
Yeah,
that was a lot that was said there.
yeah. I think what is shocking is I heard that no one knows where this actual bill came from. So if anyone watching this program, if you know who the drafter, who the architect of this bill is, please post it so we can see it. But I was asking, so where did this come from? Who crafted it? And no one can seem to know, which is scary, right? Which is kind of not only scary, but it's real shocking that you can have something on the floor being debated, but no one knows the origin of it. No one knows where it
Mm.
came from. So how many of these undisclosed or unknown bills have secretly sneaked into the legislature in Liberia, which is shocking. But maybe my information is wrong. But if anybody know who the architect of this bill is, please post it. I would love to know who it is. And the other thing is, Liberia is. I always say this: Liberia is really poor by design.
Mhm.
It's poor by design. There are people
By
who are
design.
who are
That word.
architects, who are
Right.
orchestrating, who are manipulating the system in such a way that a handful of people benefit. I mean, this is some of the same reason why you had the coup d'etat, the same reason why they had the civil war. When
Yeah.
you look at the data saying, hey, why did people go and why did Liberia have a civil war? It was because of corruption.
Mhm.
It was because of, well, tribalism was also in there. It was because of impunity. I mean, this is this is corrupt, crazy at the highest level. So since we can't seem to discover, or we can't seem to have the information in terms of who created it,
Mhm.
it's even more shocking that some people did sign on for it. That some people are willing to endorse it, which is really scary, which is really silly, right? People actually endorse something. Uh, People actually endorse something that they had no idea where it came from.
Yeah.
You see, Liberia is unique in a sense that we don't have the money. We cannot afford some of these things. And here's the reason. In the US, when the US runs a budget deficit, which for the past 41 years, they only have one balanced budget out of the past 41 years since the 70s. There's only
Yeah.
been one time the US actually had a budget surplus. They always run up a deficit. But what happens when the
Wonderful.
US runs a deficit?
Yeah.
They issue treasury securities. They issue treasury securities, which they sell to the capital markets. People go out there and they buy it. You have countries like Ireland, Hong Kong, China, Japan, all these major developed countries, they lend money to the US when the US runs a budget deficit. Liberia, on the other hand, when we run a budget deficit or when we have this kind of ridiculous spending, we can't go to the capital markets because we don't have a credit rating.
Mm.
So we rely on these silly, silly loans from the IMF, which everybody gets in SDR, and everybody is dancing in Liberia as if they just hit the Powerball. It's nonsense. It's nonsense. SDR is not the way to develop your country. You don't build your country based on IMF loans or based on loans and grants from the World Bank. You need to be able to borrow money from the capital market and use it in a sensible way. Don't do the nonsense that Ghana did. They went spending money all willy nilly, and now they have to get a bailout from the IMF. No, Liberia only has when Liberia needs to borrow money, they issue CBL bills. But the CBL bills are not subscribed by a wide range of people. It's only about maybe four banks. When you go take a look at the CBL data, it's going to be like four banks who are lending money to the Liberian government. But they lend money in such a short period of time,
Mhm.
we don't know what it's really costing the Liberian government. This nonsense of a bill, if it had ever succeeded, it was going to completely bankrupt the country. Completely bankrupt the country.
Yeah.
Because imagine someone 30, 31, 32 years old, they serve one term, then they collect half their salary for the rest of their life. Bear in mind, every year you will have more people getting into this pot,
Yeah.
this bucket of where they will need more money. And if the first year you will bankrupt the country completely, you cannot raise, you have no credit rating, you have no way of borrowing money from the capital markets, you cannot finance this.
All right.
It would have made some sense. But another thing is someone tells me this thing currently exists in some form. The current pension bill exists in some form right now in the books and record. So if anybody knows about that, please again post it. Would love to read about it and talk about it. But it's absolute. I mean, like people in the system set up the system in such a way so that others cannot come in. They keep others out, and they rig the system so the poor people remains poor. It is absolute disastrous. It's nonsense, Gabriel.
Yeah. So when you said when you told me about the bill, I just like there was just like this level of curiosity of questions, floods of questions. You know, how like I think Depu, you and Depu mentioned some of them. You know, who's paying for it? Who's paying for this? Like you said, you mentioned is the bucket. You know, people coming into that bucket every year. People are retiring every year. How are you paying for that? Like you said, it's it. I think from what I've found out so far, it's paid for through budgetary allocation, right? Now, the bigger problem with that, I think you alluded to some of that. What happens, as always, if we run a budget shortfall? So in actuality, we don't have a sustainable long-term plan in terms of how to continue to fund this thing. These are people's lives. In as much that I don't agree with it or how the structure is actually set up, these are people retirement. You know, for those who actually work in the system, if they retire, whatever you agree to, you're supposed to be able to pay for it, right? You don't want to get to a let's say 2 3 years in, and you say, oh, you know, because we have budget shortfall, we can't fund it. You know, we can't pay out your pension this this year or this month or this year, right? That becomes a problem. You know,
Mhm.
when I saw the bill, I actually read the article on it by Front Page Africa, right? If California has one of the biggest pension retirement is call it they call the CalPERS, right? California
We used to issue securities for CalPERS. We used to do
as
some money management for CalPERS.
exactly right. It's well managed, and you know why
Mhm.
it's well managed? Because they invest with some of the key institutional investors. You know, like the Vanguard, the some of the biggest hedge funds. You know, some of the biggest private equity. The same thing in the state that I live in, Massachusetts, right? We have I had two of my professors who actually sits one of them retired now in Carolina, who sits on the board. These people invest in some of the biggest like investments here just to keep that pension running. Not so they are not dependent on budgetary allocation, right? When I mean some of the biggest real estate investors you think about, they invest in those, some of the biggest industries, right? So they have a long-term plan in terms of how they're going to continue to fund that. And there's a complete fund manager who manages that, who sits on that. Now, in our case, I think you mentioned that earlier. We don't even have the budgetary allocation. We're funding this thing through budgetary allocation. That is the only source. So that means if we don't meet budget, you know, and we have to cut, there are people livelihood
It would bankrupt
that
the
are being
country
impacted.
within
Right,
a year and a half, 2 years at most. Because first of all, everybody will be clamoring to now become a legislator, right?
right.
You have people. It becomes a bonanza. Everybody will want to. As bad as it is right now in terms of the salary they're making, imagine if you're collecting 6, 7 grand. They're talking about half your salary. You're getting like $3,500 for the rest. That's why I said rather than even get, and I'm so glad the boys from the university decided to step out there and protest this. They're the only ones that seems to have the courage, that seems to have the kahunas to get out there and
Hmm.
take care of this stuff. But imagine someone collecting half their salary every month for the rest of their life from one of the poorest countries, ranked 175 out of 186 countries, one of the poorest countries in the world. It's nonsense. I can't even believe we're here discussing such nonsense
So,
like
so I
You
have
may,
a
what I was
go ahead.
saying, what I said earlier, why would the national legislature decided to leave NASCOP that is responsible for the entire government and country retirement or social security fund and decided to just come up with their own scheme? It's something that they need to go and consult. And besides that, do they really think that the decision to appropriate 50% of their salary as retirement, does it really make, is it a rational decision?
Mhm.
And if you ask anyone, is that a rational decision in the first place? Without even looking at the national budget, will it be in a position to say you can sustain that if you are to run a company that will be paying such a retirement benefit to anybody? Nowhere in this world you can get there from. But one thing I can say here is that as I raised it before and I just read it right now is that Senate is once the House of Representatives rejects, the Senate has a right to also recall and make correction. And in this news article, they are requesting for reversal and correction. And
Yeah.
I'm concerned. This is we shouldn't just think because they said it, it won't pass. These guys might say, okay, because some other politician name on the paper talking about 50%, they might be negotiating for 10 or 15. Can we reduce it down 15%? In the first place, it should be clear to the citizen that indeed you cannot have one branch of government having different benefit than the rest of the branches of government. You
Thank you.
should have it for all it because the civil servant are actually making contribution. I think 7% contribution to to NASCOP, and the government pay about 3%, or they pay 3%, government pays 7%. So that itself is something that they need to go and review.
Hmm.
And if they have such a scheme with NASCOM, it should be able to cover that. I don't think it's an appropriate decision for us to go with this. Whether they want to review it, they want to correct it, it should be something that should go to the appropriate authority, investment authority to make the decision, but not the legislature.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think you made a point that one of the questions that I had to, like you said, I initially when I read it, I thought it covered all the civils, servant, that work in the government. Pretty much everybody who work, as long as you work in the government, when you retire, you get some kind of pension depending, your salary or however else, math, to break it out to be. But from what I'm reading in there, uh, that doesn't seem to be the case, you know. So what happened to these people, like you said, who are paying into that, you know, like what becomes of them when they retire? They're working for the government too. They're spending years into that. you know. So that was one of the questions that I had, and I'm glad you actually concur with me on that as well, Larry.
Look, one of the things that they need to do, this is something that when Lee Kuan Yew came in Singapore, he kind of put in place, and it currently still exists in some form. You encourage people to save. You encourage people to save for retirement. Do not depend on government in terms of retirement. Even the social security system here in the US, it was
Hmm.
projected to go bankrupt, I don't know, maybe about 10, 15, or 20 years or so. Why? Because there are people who are collecting out of the SS system who haven't really put in that same level of investment. What you have to do is you have to create, similar to what you see in corporate America or in companies around the world,
Hmm.
create a 401k kind of situation. And 401k is just a code in the US tax
Tax
system,
law. Yeah.
right? But create a similar system where people are actually paying into this system. They pay a portion of their salary into this system. And mind you, because there has to be you have to keep in mind inflation. So just putting that money in the system by itself without investing it,
Hmm.
inflation will eat it up. Inflation is going to eat it up. So you have to put the money in the system and make sure it is well invested where it is exceeding the rate of inflation. Inflation is so high in Liberia right now. You're talking double digits inflation. If you're going to put your money in something, how is it possible you're going to earn, maybe 12% or so return on your it's kind of difficult, but people have to in fact invest a portion of the money, don't rely solely on the government in terms of retirement. That's how you create a system that doesn't bankrupt the government, put the burden on the entire state. You know, social civil servants, yeah, they deserve pension, just how employees in a private company deserve a pension as well. People need to have money to live on, but you create a structured system where people, the money is being invested. For example, last month, I believe, and Gabriel, you did mention CalPERS. Some of the fund managers for the California pension retirement system and some of the major pension systems, they were out there in South Africa last month looking for investment opportunities.
Yep.
They're looking at emerging markets, looking at places to put this money to
Hmm.
earn a higher rate of return for the people who are investing in it,
Hmm.
right? So, Liberia, same thing. If you're going to use NASCAR has to look for a place to invest that money. You can't put someone incompetent in a position like that to go and invest people money because they will lose their money. So yeah, I wouldn't rely solely on the government. The government is not properly situated. The government is not being well managed to rely on them. And I heard that VP Boyka is collecting around what $800-900 in terms of pension or retirement money from the government. That's what I heard. I heard that's what they say he's collecting, which is ridiculous for a vice
Good
president of a
Lord.
country.
I mean,
Absolutely ridiculous.
do you think that is a small amount, or is it
It
too much
is.
for?
It is nothing. It is
Uh,
not. It can't even
That's what I
cover
was going to
his
say exactly.
gasoline.
Yeah.
But I mean, I don't know how true that is. If someone watching the program, have more information on how much the VP is collecting, yeah, I would love to see that. But you need to have a system where people are investing a portion of their salary every single paycheck into the system. Then the money in the paycheck gets invested, maybe two or three percentage point above the inflation rate in the country. And it
Mhm.
should be managed. You don't have to necessarily invest in Liberia. You can invest in anywhere in any country, provided the rate of return is higher than the inflation rate.
Mhm. So I think another thing too that you guys keep alluding to is, so there's challenges. I understand the process, the method behind the pension is great and all, and I think the math too is not adding up. You can't just give somebody 50% of their salary in the last year, the salary that they earn in the last year, 50% for the life of them, and then when they retire, after they die, you go to 25%. It's not sustainable for a country like that. I think, and this is something I keep, I hope the next administration that comes in look at all of these things and do something about it. I I will be okay if we, I know that's going to be a far fetch, if we start a sovereign wealth fund. A sovereign wealth fund could be like you said. So I had a couple of buddies. You guys know sovereign wealth funds. Ghana has one now. I think Ghana has one. Nigeria has one. The biggest is the Norway, which I think is over $1 trillion, right? The Saudi have theirs as well. I had a couple of buddies that came from Saudi Arabia that I went to grad school with. Their whole time in grad school, it was paid for them through the wealth fund, right? Now, I'm not saying that we're getting, we don't, we're not even close to that yet, where that can be done, but we need to establish something similar. And I think some of you guys alluded to that. We need to establish something similar, right? Where if if there's a budget shortfall, you know, these people are able to be compensated from it, right? Or even if you do take the pension fund and make it, like you said, I think Larry, you said that as well. Invest in, put somebody competent in charge of it. Let them invest in it. Let them look, pick out. You don't even you can just manage it. You don't even have to do the investing yourself. You just manage the investment. You go, you pick fund advisors at a Vanguard or T. Rowe Price, or if the depending on how much money you have, you can go with the BlackRock, the Blackstone, the Goldman Sachs, right? Give them that money. Let them manage it for you. Let them invest it for you, right? That way you have, a little bit of, like it's you put it on a path to be sustainable. So that way, if you don't have budgetary allocation, there is an investment that is yielding some kind of returns, right? As opposed to just making this thing solely budgetary
Gabriel, it's
allocation.
because you have people in the legislature who do not understand anything about finance whatsoever. They don't understand the
Right,
mechanism of how it works. They don't
right,
understand that no country in this world has ever developed without a strong financial sector. They don't understand
right,
the five key elements you need in the financial system to grow an economy. They don't understand that stuff.
right,
That's why
right.
that's why we keep going after 100 and something years. We still going in the same circle. Look at Botswana. I see my man Emmanuel Jackson mentioned Botswana. Botswana
Mm-hmm.
only been around since 1966 maybe. Botswana have a sovereign wealth fund. Kenya has one as well. A lot of
Yeah.
the countries out there have one. Africa, we don't. Liberia, we don't have one. Why? Because we got people who do not know how to discuss that particular topic.
Yeah.
And they're not willing to bring people in who understand, the whole mechanism of how that thing works.
All right.
And I like
So,
what John Eddie is saying. So let me swing it to Depu. I don't know if you want to touch on what John Eddie just mentioned.
Depu, so I think you mentioned something earlier that I want to, and
It,
I,
it,
hun-
it,
I'm 100%
go
there.
on.
Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
No, I thought you have a question, but what I want to say here is that the legislature, it is sad that we have followed a system that our electoral process have not really given us the best that we need, and people are not voting the right people into the legislature, and we are not having, and they are not also creating opportunity to give opportunity to professional people who can guide them. But if you want to talk about sovereign wealth fund, there are so many ways in your own budget. Look at our national budget. See some of the government share or corporate income or dividend share that ever come to government that you could think about. You can never see it reported anywhere. Most of the companies say government has shares in it, like Aslam Metal. The agreement is signed, government share is there. Have they ever declared that? If you look at other companies, so many companies that have, even LBD as a bank, how many times have you seen a statement to know that this is a profit made, this is a dividend divided, and how much come to government? You are not seeing these things, so that people will say, okay, we are doing investment domestically before we talk about external.
Right.
So how do we look at our financial performance? It's something that the legislature need to look at, instead of them looking for a way to say, you know what, our retirement should be a concern to us. They should be thinking about how do they fix the system, how we fix the system to ensure that even those who are civil servants, when they retire tomorrow, they have a decent plan as they
Mm-hmm.
get into government, and they can be an investment for them from their income. And I agree with Larry, as we see the 401k in the United States. You need to have an institution that really does the investment for a government employee to ensure that they have better security. Because not because the legislature brought this bill, one of the serious constraints in a system And many of you who haven't been living Liberia, you will see that. What is discouraging young people and most of the drivers of this whole insecurity in dishonesty in government to steal is because those who served in government before, there were no plan for their retirement. And once you see them and retire and they leave offices without any income, it become very disgusting and discouraging. So as a result, people get into the system think that, you know what, I have no retirement plan, I got no saving for myself, so it's better for me to steal. So what we need to do to curtail these things is to see how best to reform our system to see how to provide security for the people who work in the system. We are classroom instructors, classroom teachers, health workers. These people are retiring and living basically below poverty line. These are things that national legislature is supposed to be discussing instead of them thinking about only what would benefit them and their family. Because the citizens, once the income of the citizen is secure in terms of income security, life insurance, health insurance, and all of these things, they have it. It becomes an opportunity to serve. But you cannot be having you making $7,000. $7,000 is basically paying over 10 teachers. And you're yes, it's 7,000 more than 10 teachers are because some of the teachers are making 250, 150, and one person is making $7,000. You're practically saying one legislator is paying more than 10 teachers a month, legislator salary. So what's about this? The entire 56,000 human being in the civil service. Talk about 56,000 civil servant, and you were just talking about just 103 people. What's the proportion in terms of income, distribution? How will 103 live on almost like 80% of the income, whilst the rest
Yeah.
20% living on less than 10% of the income? Let's see that the inequality is very wide. Right now in Liberia, the gap is very wide. We should find a way, the legislature should be finding solutions, proffering ideas that can reduce the gap. If you talk about national legislature today, no one in Liberia, citizen, will ever vote that identical bill. They will not endorse it. Everyone will reject it because they are the best paid, less hour of work, less stress, no activity. They
But
go to
you
work.
made a point though. You made a
Yes.
point that this bill, believe it or not, is gonna come back in some shape or form, and it's gonna get passed. Just how they did with the 30,000, how people were fighting against it. And I agree with you on that. I think it's gonna come back. We gotta watch out for it. It's gonna come back in different shape or form, and somebody's they're just gonna put their pen on it and sign
Gabriel, I'm
pass
speaking
that.
from experience because when I was technician before administrative planning, there was a bill. These guys were doing a date, budget year. They proposed that they're going to have what they call legislative uh, earmark or
Yeah.
legislative fund for the constituency. So each constituency will be given like $3 million. And that was a serious debate. And later on, they had to negotiate with President Salih administration. And said it's going to be 17 million. What is 17 million for legislative earmark? What will be done by they themselves will control it. And they went and fought and she rejected it. What you guys did at last, what they've done? They brought in another fund. They call it a legislative project. So, and all of that 103 constituencies, they still have money for the various project. And interestingly, this project will be dispersed to them. At the end of the day, so many incomplete projects. Check the Ministry of Finance and see, let's review some of the domestic debt we have in the country. Incomplete legislative project because in the end, they cannot disburse the money. You got incompetent contractor will take over. They cannot complete the project and they cannot pay them. So these are the complications we have in the system we need to work on. So for me, I think that once they introduce this and there's a public outcry, they will shift it into different format and bring it in again. And you know that recently, while people were crying for this whole 17 million legislative EMI project, They brought new program again to be taking $30,000. You know, there's so many ways they can introduce it. So we just have to watch out. I'm serious. Yeah, the legislators are
You
crafty.
know what they can say in like, bro, that technique.
Oh yes, yes, they do that and bargain with the executive, with the president. Or you have to give this, or we do not do this. So today they are calling for 50%. There's an outcry among them. It's likely that they will bring in another form and say, you know what, our retirement is supposed to be something this amount.
Yeah.
Like what Eddie
Larry,
is saying in the chat,
can
the
any of you
elephant
speak to this
hunters in the
comment?
parliament. But I agree with his statement that is posted right now. You shouldn't get out of a system what you haven't put in. So people are looking to get out of this system when they haven't really invested into the retirement system, which is nonsense. Only in Liberia, something like some, only in Africa, maybe some crap like that would work, But here's the problem: the people we need to change the system, the people we need who are robbing, who are robbing the system, are the same ones who are rigging the system.
Yes.
So the system is not going to change if the people who you need to change it are in place, and they're not going to change it. How are you going to convince someone who is collecting 30,000 for counted projects who doesn't even tell you what the projects are they're working on? How are you going to convince them to give up that 30,000? It's nearly impossible.
Yeah.
And the only way you can change the system is to ask the legislator to stop what they're doing and make sure the system is fair for everyone. And they're not going to do it. So we're caught in a catch-22. We need them to do this, to stop this, but we can't get them to stop this and they're not going to do it. The whole system needs a complete overhaul. Liberia is, I don't know, it's just absolutely ridiculous. Some of these things, then you don't see them in other countries. As soon as they appear in other countries, people have some massive protest, and these guys rescind. You see why the whole Lebanese government, the whole parliament resigned?
Mm-hmm.
They resigned because the people were fed up with the corruption when they had that big explosion in Lebanon.
Yeah.
People took to the street. They were tired with that nonsense. Everybody in there resigned. But when people protest in Liberia, then you hear other people say, "Oh, we don't want war." Well, nobody is saying protest is not a declaration of war. It's just you have a right. It's in the Constitution. You have the right to petition your legislator to stop what they're doing.
Yeah.
Just because you petition your legislator in the form of a protest doesn't mean that you're taking up arms. No, you're telling them, look, we're not. And that's why I said when the Soup Boys went out there to discuss this thing, people had to give them a chance to say, yeah, we agree with you guys. That's why the Americans support and told Musadin, you guys have to give these boys their permit to protest without some counter protest. That's the way people express their grievances. Because the system is absolutely rigged.
Yeah.
And we're only looking at it from a perspective from, like, let's say from Monrovia. Look at the rural parts of Liberia. The place is a complete poverty in the rural areas is even higher. And before we jump onto something else, let me just say this real quick. Daniel Minion, who was here with us about a week and a half ago,
yes,
he was doing a great job. We saw what Daniel was doing, and we thank Daniel for being here at Focus on Liberia. And I saw Daniel on Costa Show. Appearing on Costa Show gave Daniel great relevance. The reason why Daniel, the work he was doing was so important, he sent students to take the WIFE exam, and all of them passed.
Yeah.
Rare to see something like that in Liberia. Daniel did a great job, took his retirement. This guy was a comptroller over at the state of California. The guy invested his hard-earned money. He built a fabulous school down in one of the counties. What is it? The southeast, somewhere about River G.
River Cess.
In River Cess. Fabulous school.
Yeah.
And Daniel was in the process of loading up a container with more stuff to send to Liberia. Unfortunately, Daniel passed away. So, from me and the team over here, we want to extend our deepest sympathy to Daniel's family. Because the work Daniel was doing was something where when I saw him on Costa Show, I said, wow, altruism is still alive. Mm-hmm. The ability to give to other people without expecting anything in return is still alive because of what Daniel was doing. Yeah. And when I saw that Daniel suffer, when he passed away, California has been going through a devastating high heat It's been like 100 plus in
Yeah,
California. And the work that Daniel was doing, it kind of made me question, is Liberia cursed? How can someone who is doing such good thing, life
yeah,
not be
this,
spared?
yeah,
But instead, but you can never ask this question. You shouldn't ask this question anyway, right?
right.
Because we never know
No,
what plans
the
God has
the
for us.
the what I liked about him, and I think I told him on the show is that he knows his stuff. He knows what he wants to do, right?
Yeah.
He's very intentional about it. I think on the show he mentioned that the we're going off a tangent here, but that's okay. He mentioned that people were even petitioning him to go run, but he actually turned that down because he knows what he wants to do and he was doing it.
Hmm.
And he- as I said, I told this guy that you know the thing I like about him because he's from the bush, we're both from the bush. He doesn't beat around the bush, right? He just give it to you straight as it is. He's vocal about what he knows, right? He said this is what I want to do, and he verbalized that. He tells people this is what I want to do. The reason why I like it is because we kind of shy away from our calling. This is somebody who never shy away from what he wanted to do. To say, oh, I'm just doing this, I just want. You never hear him say, oh, this is what I'm just doing. Let me just see where it will go, where it will lead. He had a long-term plan, as to where he wanted to take it, and
Hmm.
that's what I like about
His
him.
next
Right,
steps was,
right,
after all his students passed the WAC exam, when he was here talking to us, he said now he want them to do the exams.
right,
That was an ambitious goal.
right.
I mean, the guy set up a school where he said, just come. He bring in a tailor from Monrovia to come. They measure the students then. He put uniform on them. And he was setting on a program now where he was feeding them. And you saw the school. We saw the pictures. Man, it was a fabulous thing the guy was doing. It's that kind of altruism that makes you have faith in Liberians. And then you compare what someone like Daniel was doing to what the legislator are doing. Daniel was giving. The legislator are taking,
Thank you.
consistently taking.
Yeah.
And you see them, when you see some of the videos of these guys then in session, it's like a comedy club. It's like the absolute jokers in there. They don't seem to take anything serious. Only maybe a handful of people will actually stick to the issues. Some of the people that put up for confirmation, and I know Depu, I don't know what happened to the guy that put up at the RIA.
Okay.
I don't think they accepted him. But
He didn't make it.
back to Mayor's project.
Yeah.
One of the things for me, I call it personalization of the state. Now, the guys personalize the state. That most of the lawmakers are thinking that instead of them looking for funding for public institutions, they fight to have their personal institutions. So they have their personal
Mhm.
hospital, personal school, personal investment all over the place, and people building schools because. And the question there is that if you don't have institutional arrangement and you fund some of these things, they go for subsidies from the national budget to their private schools, and it's becoming serious challenge for the state because in the end, that's how the whole system will get broken down. No support to private facility but individual schools. You check right now, majority, in fact, from 51st legislature, 52nd up to the 54th. That's one of the things they do. People with higher rank of responsibility, it source the funding from the budget straight to their private investment and not public facility. I mentioned this in one of our conversations on Facebook. Like for example, Pinsville, where you got District 5, where T5 is representing. You have the only high school that there cannot accommodate the number of students, the demand for students. The next thing that the vocational institution there, MVTC, no
Mm.
support. Chinese have to renovate that, and today they are looking for instructors and looking for facility. Nothing. But you have T5 College, you got T5 High School, and these are big investment. No funding for government facility, and you see across the country. And one thing that there is that how do we really give these kind of people another retirement benefit 50% of what they make to take it home? It's unbelievable. You are already obstructing the public resources, not directing it to public activity, and you want for us to give you 50% of what you earn until you die.
You see, Deadpool is this, and Gabriel is this level of intentional corruption that led to a few of them being sanctioned.
Yeah.
It's intentional corruption,
Yes.
misappropriating state funds for your personal gain. It's intentional
Yes.
corruption. That's why these people are getting sanctioned, and they need to pay close attention to that. They need to pay close
Yes.
attention to that.
Yeah. I would say this, and I know people usually when I say people think that's a bit radical. I will be okay if next government comes in, if like those that can be weed out, just weed them, get them out. You know, I know some of these people were elected or
But Gabriel, we
such.
tried this before. There was a complete overhaul. When was it, Deadpool? Was it 2017? That was a complete overhaul. Or was it 20? It was one of the elections. There was a complete overhaul of the legislature. A lot of
Yes.
the
It
content.
it, it happened 2014
14.
senatorial election.
Mm-hmm.
Senatorial election, only two senators returned. That was Senator Joe Howard Taylor and Senator Prince Johnson. The rest of them
So how do
were
we?
clear out.
So how do we get out of the rest of these guys? Oh, I can't say they weren't corrupt before they got in. How do we? How did the rest of them become corrupt? The new guys, are new breed, supposedly that got in there. Because what we're talking here, this is not the only topic we talk about. We talk about the budget. We talk about this, this pension. There's the 30,000. Like uh, this is what I usually say, right? There gotta come a time where you you don't just look at your family, just to your family anymore and say, okay, we're fine, right? There got to come a time where you look at your family and say, okay, we're fine. But what about the next door neighbor? What about these people I walk by, every day in the street that are begging? These are the people that I'm representing. There got to be some level of consciousness within these people, and
Gabriel,
I
they
don't
don't
see none
understand
of
that
it.
public service is service to the people. They don't understand it. In Liberia, they see it as service to themselves. That is the key difference right there, right, Deadpool?
That's the reason why majority of them before they will have to look for funding money at all level, whether it causes them to borrow money or they're going to cause them to take money from people to go for re-election. They have to do it because they feel that look, this is the only area I have my investment opportunity. It's not about service,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
realistically, I think the mistake too is also coming from the electorates. They feel out of poverty, majority of them feel that look, my life depends on what this man can do for me. Without them thinking that look, I can build myself, I can work hard. If I'm able to take care of my family, take care of my children, we can do better than this man. Therefore, we have to vote this person out.
Hmm.
That decision is actually with the electors, with the voters. As we speak, that's one of the main reasons why that the government will always reserve cash. Like we discussed last week, they do
Hmm.
printing of money. They have enough cash to give it to the electors to convince them and just have these people re-elected. And that is a perpetual poverty. But how do we address the issue? Is to come up with some reform mechanism through international intervention and through domestic intervention to see how best to reduce the influence of individuals with huge cash to manipulate the system.
So
Yes.
there's two things I want to say now. So I agree with you, but I also think is a larger problem in terms of our society, right? One of the things you said, and the reason why I'm saying it is that you said that most of these people they rely on the government, right? Like the voters to elect to like you said, to give them money to come time for election to elect them. In addition to that, I'm not playing devil advocate here. People that work in the government, like the Senate or the House of Representative and all of that, right? Or any part of the government. Like when they come from the government, there's not a private sector they can go into, right? Like even if they like imagine me in a county, let's say I'm representing a county, right? And I say, you know what? This government isn't working anymore. Like the things I want to do, I'm not getting my way in the house in the House of Representative. I'm just gonna because I'm a more, I'm just gonna step back and go work in the private sector. It's none. Like not even NGO to say I'm just gonna step back and go work for a private sector. So that means what it does to me now, it compels me that even if I leave this government, there's no other way in this country for me to make this kind of money I'm making, the lifestyle that I have now. So what it does, it compels me to stay there, to do anything at every cost to stay there, right? That's
Give,
that
That's
that's
Gabriel.
that's
that's
what the French philosopher René Descartes said. People always do what is in their best interest. That's why when you see someone being altruistic, you kind of say, okay, that's what service to the people is all about. But
right.
Jeff, on a yearly basis, how much you think the senators in Liberia make on a yearly basis with
On a
all their
yearly basis,
benefits and stuff? Just a rough number on the benefits.
roughly, I think each of them is supposed to be having 160,000.
Yeah. So, and that's for a population of around 4.9 million people, 160,000. So
Mhm.
think about it, right? One of the richest states in the US, New York, with about 20 million people. Senators make around about 109,000. New York, they make 109,000.
And New York is
Liberia,
expensive, right?
yeah, like and New York is far more expensive in
Right.
terms of living. Liberia, they're making around 160,000 when you throw in all their benefits.
Yes,
I mean,
it's
really,
13
really sit down
it's
and think about it.
13,000 it's 13,000 that are including all your benefits.
Wow. And that's some of the radical thing I was talking about. If I come, I will
So that's
like
about
I would do
40,
executive
yeah, you're about
order.
close to 60,000, 160. Yeah, I'm sorry,
Yeah,
Gabriel. Go ahead, brother.
13,000. Yeah. If I would do an executive order to cut everybody's salary down to a level, I think like like if
The
you're gonna
executive order won't do it. You need to pass it. You need to pass. You probably had to repeal the law that set it up, or you need to pass a new law. And
out,
who's
then
going
that's
to?
what I would do. Whatever channel I have to go
But
through,
how are you going to
that's what I
pass the
would do.
law when the people that have to pass it are the ones who are enjoying? That's why I
Yeah.
said the system is rigged. You can't get them to change that law.
Yeah.
They are
Yes,
making more money than New York State senators.
yes, Larry. One of the things that we have to be very realistic with ourselves. Gabriel, we're talking about people thinking about a fallback position or retirement or income after departure from the national legislature. And personally, I always say this to people that look, you need to have people with experience. The House of Legislature is supposed to be a place for retired people, people with experience going there to make impact on the society. If you take a man who had never had income before, who never worked, and
Mhm.
does not have that integrity, does not have that principle to have him elected as senator, and it will be difficult struggle.
Yeah,
So one of the things that there is to say, look, let's set a standard because realistically, many of the people who are elected have never worked, and some of them think that look, let me invest in this process and get in there and get what I can get out without having a vision, without having any plan for the country to say, you know what, there's something that I identify. For example, if we want to go look at commerce, what do I do if I want to be House committee member on the House committee on commerce? What contribution can I make? These are things that people get elected for. Say, look, education, our education system has so many problems. Therefore, I want to be one as a former classroom teacher or
Once it
a
on it.
graduate or something. I need to go there to make change. These are things people do around the world to reform the country. But the reality here is that many people who extorted money from people during the war, during the transition government, and these are the people who had the opportunity to get elected. And as they get elected, what it does now is set the precedent to the people that look, you don't really need honest people to serve in our politics. You
Yeah.
need more dishonest people to be there because the guys got more of what the state has.
Yeah.
So that's the problem we have today. It is becoming difficult to get a right character of people being elected because majority of the people who are into politics themselves do not have the character. So
Or the
that's a that's a
barbarians.
system.
Yeah.
Yes. So it get complicated, and we are moving gradually. In fact, since the Civil War, where we are right now, what took us to Civil War is what we are faced with right now:
Mhm.
right.
Mhm.
nepotism, corruption, and everything.
Yep.
How do we reverse it? It's about action from the citizen, from partners. Everyone need to see the danger, the potential threat to the peace that we enjoy today.
So go ahead, Larry.
Real quick, and they have to there has to be some term limits. They have to reduce. Someone can go to the legislature and be there for 9 years, and they can totally underperform. I mean, they can underperform for the first 2 years, and they have to remain there for another seven. I mean,
Yeah,
it
that's
is
insane.
disastrous. These guys shouldn't be there. No one should be in that place for more than 4 years without getting reelected. 4 years, get reelected. Let's see. Let the people that measure you based on what you've done in 4 years. 9 years. They're there for 9 years, right? Gabriel,
Senators are
Yeah,
there
it
for
is 9 years.
9 years,
Yeah.
9 years.
and representatives are there for 6 years. So some of them gone 12 years. Some people been there for 18 years,
I think Prince
Yeah,
and
Johnson's
it's
most
been in
still
times
there.
it's still want
18.
to go back.
Prince Johnson's been there 18. He's going for he want to go there
18
for another
years.
9. And he said
Yeah,
after
so
the 9 years, then
27.
he'll come out. All right. This is
And you
this
can
is what I
underperform, and you will still.
yeah.
It's the system. I'm telling you, this. When you look at why a lot of African countries have civil strife, is because after a period of time, the poor people just get fed up.
The ball will
People
break.
just get
Yeah.
totally fed up.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah. No, this is something that I wanted to say, right? And I think one of you guys alluded to that. This no, it's Larry. The this whole term limit, I agree with you with the term limit, and I agree with Depu in terms of what he's saying. The same place where we were that got us into war. I think we're at the same place right now, right? Now the problems here with us is that we don't. Every other country, the citizen can protest, and something happens, right? They are intentional about it. If they said to go on the street, they will go on the street and protest and something. Every other country where there's protests, Nigeria with the whole SAR formation of that police force, the people protested until they disbanded. You guys talked about Lebanon, right? It's never happened in our case, you know. And there's this thing that we always do. There's this thing what the people call fearmonger. We fearmonger, but I think what we also do, we what I call warmonger. So the moment people want to start protesting, people, oh, we don't want to go back to war.
This
We don't
thing
want
that
to
we
go back
always
to
do.
war,
We
right?
there's this thing.
Right. We don't want to get into war, as if somebody exercising their democratic right. It signals that they're trying to start war, But that's the thing about us. We're passive. I always say that we're passive group of people. Like something will happen, we will make noise and not say you never hear that again. The same thing with protests. Even if we go in the street, those kids that protested. I don't know how long they were there. I think for a day. They protested, they went back you know Now I'm not saying the responsibility is upon them. I think the responsibility is upon all of us. you know People, if we don't agree with what is happening in a country, we have the right to protest, but we're not intentional with what we do, in terms of protesting. I don't know, people get afraid and they go back to their very respective place. The same thing when people get killed, you hear us making noise. That noise doesn't lead into something tangible happening, you know to say, there's changes in the law, we ensure that changes in the law to protect the people. None that ever happens.
Mhm.
So that's a problem that we have. Like, we're passive, very passive group of people. This is why nothing happened, and these people are aware of it. This is why we can have a bill like this they push back. But I agree, it's going to come back in another form, and believe it or not, it's going to get passed. We made noise about the 30,000 budget allocation. What happens? They did get their money, right? And we we just say that is despicable. We may every Nothing ever happens, right? So that's
It's
how
like right
passive of
now.
a people we
It's
are.
like right now we're waiting for the U.S. to sanction people as a way to, we're expecting the U.S. to do what they think
Do our
to
dirty
do
work.
what we should be doing
Yeah,
ourselves in
exactly.
terms of the sanctions, banning them from coming to the U.S., not giving them passport, not giving them visas, and all that stuff.
Right.
Look, the last time I was looking at the data in terms of protests around the world, and I noticed the protest in Liberia was the one from 2019, but there were places where people were protesting for days. The protest in Hong Kong,
Yep.
that went on for a long time. The protest in Hong Kong, it went on for so long that Hong Kong sovereign debt rating was reduced by Fitch Investor Services because of the risk, and that influenced some of the decisions made by the Hong
Hmm.
Kong government to change their behavior. You know,
Yeah.
we saw what happened with the Arab Spring. It brought about some major changes in a lot
Yeah.
of countries. Some countries just, like Syria, they just played hard headed. That's why I think Bashar ended up on the war crimes list.
Yeah.
But yeah, some countries do protest and it brings about change. But you're right, Gabriel. Is that guilt, fear mongering
Yep.
that makes the people sort of put them in a state of, accept this. Otherwise,
Yeah.
we'll blame you if there's chaos in the country. No, a lot of the protests are non-violent. The only reason why you have violence in protests when you have a counter protest.
Right.
That's when violence tends to break out. And
Hmm.
that's why the US embassy told them, hey, give people permit to protest and stop this nonsense with counter protesting because that's when the violence occur. So I know we're kind of on our time, right?
Yeah, we're on the hour mark. I think we should wrap up. Definitely should wrap up. Let's take some comments here, and then maybe we can call it uh, uh, the day. So I think we read Ja Eddie comment. This one is from Emmanuel Jackson. I think somebody may have spoken to that. He said Botswana has one. I think he meant the sovereign, yeah, the sovereign wealth fund uh, with
Yeah,
billion.
these countries didn't have funds for retirement money.
Yeah.
Why would I have it in Liberia or, you know, I wonder the pension they have in Liberia if it's invested anywhere. What's NASCAR doing with that money?
That's a great question. All right.
For now, I think NASCAR, the current administration has done some substantial investment in terms of real estate
Yes, that's
property.
what I was told.
I
Yeah.
think that what they're doing now, like the LRA building is owned by NASCAR and another one on Turner Street. So I think that's
Yeah.
much of progress compared
Yeah.
to how it had been in the past. But I think we need to learn more lesson from Ghana and other people who are investing the money, and they also go into real estate in Ghana and also go into other investments.
Hmm.
And it's a great opportunity for the government to leverage on that.
Yeah. I heard they're also invested in. There's this hospital in. I think it's a private hospital, a medical facility.
Okay, yes,
They,
if
yeah.
yeah, whatever that is to Ewa Junction, the same
Yes.
same location.
Yeah.
Where
They
if
invested.
if that's from NASCOP, that's great investment too. So
Yeah. They said they invested in that. Yeah.
yeah, which of course
I know.
it has social benefit as well.
Right.
It helped the health sector as well.
Yeah. Uh, this one is for Jai again. He said greedy elephant hunters in the parliament. I think he's referring to those people. This one is from Jackson, Emmanuel Jackson. He said all the more reason for three branches of our government to design policies modernizing our labor, capital, and land markets. Um, I think he's referencing the. He said Lebanon. It was simply government. It was simply government wanted to charge the WhatsApp that WhatsApp account, and Lebanon took to the street. Oh wow! Uh, so they actually did that over WhatsApp account. And I think the people took to the street because that was a little predatory. All right, this is the last. Maybe not. This one is from Jackson again. He said, "We will continue to distribute to contribute to his work in." I think he's referring to Manuel. We'll continue to contribute to his work in River says. Dan Mannion, I was a natural contributor to the work years ago. Okay, this is somebody who uh, actually contributed in his project. And this is the last comment. It's from William Braw. Said the Arab Spring brought total damage to many Arab countries. Liberia needs innovative politician and statesmen, not protest organizer politician. Um, any comment on this before we we wrap
So
up.
what happens? William, if you don't get your innovative politicians, and which over the past decade we haven't seen the innovative politicians, because in fact over the past maybe 15 years or so we haven't seen these politicians. So much so that in 2013 there was an overhaul of the legislature, and now we end up with a new class of politician that's been there, and they're still not innovative. So what do? You wait another 20 years, hoping for that innovative politician to come. You wait another, 15, 20, 30, 40 years. At some point, you're going to get fed up, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you have to tell me, at what point will you say, okay, we're not going to get this innovative politician that we're praying for. We need to try something else. And I think that was one of the reasons that led to some of the issues we saw in the Arab Spring, the protest. Sure, it didn't work out for all the countries, but a lot of countries did in fact change. But it opened people's eyes in terms of what protesting can do.
Right.
If you look back at China, Tiananmen Square,
Yep.
the one guy who stood in front of the tanks back in the 80s to protest, that was a sign that, listen, protesting are powerful, and it's in the Constitution. It's in the Constitution. Why is it in the Constitution? Because it gave us the right to petition the legislators to change their ways. So while I agree, Liberia does need innovative politicians, but what is the backup plan if you don't get those innovative politicians?
Yeah, that's brilliant response. Depu.
Yes, I would just want to make comment on the issue of Marion's project in River Says.
Yeah.
I know that's one of the main reasons why the government need to be very creative in analyzing the impact, social impact of the budget. In this case, where the guy built a very great high school in an inaccessible region like Mowai District, Riverside County has only one government high school in Seston. So such a school need to receive subsidy from government. I think that's how you do analysis, because with that, he has actually constructed a project that government intervention. In this case now will be like, look, how do you source funding to the school to ensure that it's more viable to educate the young people. I think we did some similar analysis before, like when we were doing budget those days, like common law, looking at the case study in the whole of Magibi from Podota all the way from Banga all the way coming to Monserrato, Kakata, you not see any high school, Konola, being the religious institution, but as the only high school in between. We have to make argument for them to make a case for them to have subsidy, because like that it helped to expand services to inaccessible areas. So I think my suggestion would be the Ministry of Education should consider registering the school for 2023 budget to see how best they can continue the project that Menion started. With that, I will say that I will still be in the same position to say we should be very careful with the bill introduced by the national legislature for their retirement. These guys are crafty. They have a way of changing the narrative in their own interest. The House of Representatives rejected it. Yes, it's good for the publicity and the politics for now, but we should watch out. It's likely they can put it in different form or different shape and bring it back for the public to accept it. So let's see. It's good for us to also have a very good recommendation or discussion with the legislature on how do we consider their retirement. What contribution should they make at this time with the income they're taking? $13,000 is huge sum of money. You can make contribution just 7% of that before your 9 years over, you have good saving. So thank you so much for the time. It was short today, but I think it has been a very fruitful discussion.
Yeah. Larry.
Every time someone puts out any bill, whether it's this criminal bill that was put out or any bill, you need to have either the LRA or the Ministry of Finance tell the Liberian people how much this is going to cost in terms of, on a yearly basis, what the total cost would be, because we know we don't have the revenue to support something like this. So anytime someone initiate any legislation that calls for budgetary allotment, we should tell the Liberian people how much it's going to cost them, because they'll either have to pay for it. Nothing is free, right? We learned that basic economics. There's no such thing as a free good. Somebody has to pay for it. You either pay for it in terms of taxes, or you're going to pay for it. Other services being reduced somewhere else. Someone will start robbing Peter to pay Paul. So something like this, someone should have crunched the number and say, hey, what is this going to cost 5 years from now, 10 years from now, or 1 year from now? And then when you look at that cost and say, okay, can the budget, do we have the revenue to support that? Then you can make the decision. But I didn't hear anyone discussing the cost of something like this on a yearly basis. I really didn't hear anything about that.
Yeah.
So I don't know who can factor that into a law somewhere, but someone needs to put something on the books that please tell us what any of this stuff is going to cost us when you initiate it.
Mhm.
All right, my Depu, Gabriel, it was always a
Yeah.
pleasure being here with you guys, man.
All right. No, thank you. I think great points you guys made. I don't think I have anything else to add to that.
Yeah. And I agree with
Again,
my man. It's a totally evil, selfish, and criminal bill. What my man William Broad is saying right here.
I think we cover we cover a lot of ground within an hour. Whoever's with us so far, thank you for sticking with us. I know we started late, so we only have an hour. Um, Again, hopefully you can join us next Saturday at 3 o'clock same time. This time, hopefully we'll get our acts together and be on time. Um, Again, as I say, I don't have anything else to add to that. I think you guys covered that brilliantly, and as we always say, regardless of whether you think that this bill was good for Liberians or it was bad for Liberians, whether you think we need innovative leaders as opposed to protester, there's one thing that's you know make that is true, which is a common denominator that we're all Liberians, and regardless of what we say, we just every conversation is to move the needle an inch closer to perfecting our democracy. So thank you for joining us, and we will see you next Saturday at 3 o'clock. Adios.
We are Liberians.